Good morning. I'm Robert White, Council Member at Large and Chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Monday, December 9th, 2024, and the time is now 12:07 p.m. We are meeting in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building. I'm calling to order this public hearing of the committee. Today, we're meeting to discuss Bill 25-945, the Housing is Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024. Councilmember Zachary Parker introduced this legislation along with Councilmembers Pinto, Henderson, and Bonds in September. It's nearly impossible to talk about health without talking about housing. Homelessness is tied to serious health and safety risks, and for someone who's pregnant, the stress of homelessness doubles. Pregnancy already increases a person's vulnerability to things like infections, anemia, and elevated stress levels, all of which can harm the mother as well as the fetal development. Struggling to find stable housing also makes it tough to access consistent prenatal care, food, and mental health supports. Right now, access to the district's family housing services defines family as a person with a minor or dependent child or a pregnant woman in her third trimester. The Housing is Maternal Health Amendment Act would change that to include people in their second trimester as well. This means pregnant individuals could access things like non-congregate family shelters and mandatory shelter placements even earlier on, which could provide important stability and increase the odds of a healthy pregnancy. Here in the district, the hard truth is that we have some of the worst maternal health outcomes in the country. Our maternal mortality rate is nearly double the national average, and people of color are hit hardest. Black women represent half of all births, but account for 90% of birth-related deaths. People of color also make up 80% of people experiencing homelessness. Anyone can do the math there that pregnant people in our shelter system need all the support we can provide. For someone navigating both homelessness and pregnancy at the same time, this amendment is a small change that might make a big difference. I'm looking forward to hearing from our public witnesses and the Department of Human Services today to get insights from residents and experts on how best to meet the needs of our pregnant residents experiencing a homelessness crisis. I'll now turn to my colleague for an opening statement and want to recognize Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker, who also is author of this bill.
Thank you, Chair White. And I would like to thank Councilmembers Pinto, Henderson, and Bonds for co-introducing this important legislation with me. The purpose of the bill is to create better outcomes for pregnant women who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. We can do this by making sure the definition of family, as defined by the Homeless Services Reform Act of 2005, is more inclusive. Currently, the definition of family only includes a pregnant woman in her third trimester and any group of individuals with at least one minor or dependent child who intends to remain together as a family unit. This definition ultimately works as a barrier for pregnant women who have no children but have not yet reached their third trimester. These are women who are likely experiencing their first pregnancy and would greatly benefit from having earlier access to housing. There are numerous studies to support the notion that we cannot wait until the third trimester to support pregnant women. In a study of data for 672 women who were homeless at the time of delivery, the Journal of Perinatal found that homelessness and pregnancy was associated with adverse perinatal outcomes, including increased odds of preterm delivery across all gestational ages, increased risk of neonatal intensive care unit admission, and low birth weight independent of preterm delivery. There was a comprehensive analysis completed by the DC Department of Health's Calling All Sectors Initiative, or CASI, from 2019 to 2022 of 20 interviews with DC residents who were homeless during pregnancy. This resulted in DC CASI's recommendation to ensure immediate access to homelessness assistance for pregnant women regardless of trimester. Over a 2-year period, on average, 1,270 pregnant women sought homelessness assistance at Virginia Williams Family Resource Center annually. Of these individuals, 11 were identified as being in their first trimester and 48 in their second trimester. The DC CASI project served as the catalyst for the spring 2022 policy change by DHS at Virginia Williams to provide 24-hour continuous access to a low barrier shelter, and case management for individuals in their first or second trimester. However, I do not believe that goes far enough to address the needs faced by our pregnant population. We know that increased access to a stable home environment will lead to better outcomes for our homeless community. Enabling pregnant women in their second trimester to have access to short-term family housing will allow them to engage in prenatal and self-care and prepare for the birth of their child without the added pressure of residing in a shelter or worse, being homeless. Thank you, Chair White, and I look forward to today's hearing.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Parker. Everyone should have received a copy of the witness list yesterday. I'll call folks on our witness list in panels of 5. If you are virtual, when I call you, our team will promote you from Zoom attendee to Zoom panelist so that you can testify. When you're promoted, you will drop out of the hearing momentarily and come back in as a panelist, after which time you'll be able to unmute and turn on your camera. Public witnesses will be provided with 4 minutes to testify. Advisory neighborhood commissioners will have 5 minutes to testify. And I will now call up our first panel of public witnesses. Aza Nadhari, Executive Director of Mama Toto Village. Kelly Sweeney McShane, President and CEO of Community of Hope. McKenna Osborne, Policy Attorney with the Children's Law Center. Ariel May. Shanae Bond, if you are with us in person or virtually, let us know. We haven't seen you yet. Okay. Otelia Pittman, Parent Ambassador with Educare DC. And that will be our first panel. And it looks like Aza Nadhari, you are with us virtually, so you can begin your testimony when you're ready.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Aza Nadhari, and I am the Executive Director of Mama Toto Village, and I am privileged to provide this testimony in strong support of the Housing is Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024. As an organization devoted to advancing reproductive justice and maternal health for Black women and birthing people, this legislation aligns directly with our mission and our research findings. The intersection of housing insecurity and maternal health is well documented in research, and in our January 2024 report, Housing Justice is Reproductive Justice, a review of housing justice as a structural determinant of Black women and birthing people's reproductive health in Washington, D.C. The data is clear. Stable, dignified housing is a fundamental determinant of maternal and infant health. Yet the current policy framework falls short of meeting the needs of Black women and birthing people in the district. Some key findings on housing and maternal health. Maternal mortality rates in Washington, D.C. are twice the national average, with Black women nearly 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. Ward 7 and 8, home to predominantly Black communities, bear the brunt of these outcomes. Black women in D.C. face eviction rates that are double those of their white counterparts. Almost 60% of eviction filings in Ward 7 occur in Ward 7 and 8, despite these areas comprising only 25% of renters. And housing instability is linked to increased stress, preterm birth, and low birth weights, perpetuating intergenerational cycles of health disparities. Expanding the definition of family under the Homeless Services Reforms Act to include pregnant individuals in their second trimester is crucial and evidence-based policy intervention. By providing earlier access to stable housing, the legislation addresses the harmful effects of housing insecurity during a critical stage of pregnancy. Mama Toto's Village's housing justice framework emphasizes that housing must be long-term, safe, and affordable. It must be designed to sustain the cultural diversity of all communities, and it must be free from restrictive and arbitrary legislative barriers. This legislation is a step towards realizing that vision. Mama Toto strongly urges the council to pass this legislation. By doing so, you will affirm the district's commitment to maternal health equity and ensure that every expecting mother and birthing person has the stability needed to achieve positive health outcomes for themselves and their child. We thank Councilmember Zachary Parker and the co-introducers of this bill for their leadership and dedication to improving maternal health outcomes in the district. We stand ready to support the implementation of this legislation and to continue advocating for systemic changes that prioritize the health and well-being of all birthing people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Kelly Sweeney McShane with the Community of Hope. Welcome.
Thank you. So good afternoon. My name is Kelly Sweeney McShane. I'm President and CEO of Community of Hope, which is a federally qualified community health service center and homeless services provider in the District of Columbia. I am here to testify in strong support of the Housing as Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024. I will also share details about Community of Hope's Housing Our Newborns Empowering You program, which we also call HONEY, that supports people who are both pregnant and experiencing homelessness in partnership with the Department of Human Services. Community of Hope supports DHS's current policy, which was implemented in 2022, that provides housing supports for people in the first and second trimester of pregnancy. However, we are also in support of this legislation as it would embed this policy in law for those in their second trimester of pregnancy and reduce any possibility that it could revert back to just the third trimester at any time in the future due to budget or other pressures. While there may be some concern about increased costs associated with this law, I would argue that the costs are just coming 3 months earlier than they would anyway as people progress to their third trimester. If additional funding is needed to implement this law, however, we would urge the Council to identify this funding needed so it does not result in budget cuts in other parts of the homeless continuum of care, as we've already seen reductions in homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing for families. Community of Hope's HONEY program provides care for people who are both pregnant and experiencing homelessness. Grew out of the Pew Charitable Trust funded Calling All Sectors initiative, which I say CASSE, led by the DC Health's Office of Health Equity. As the community partner in CASSE, Community of Hope did interviews and focus groups with housing providers as well as clients with lived experiences. Housing providers said that their case managers were just not knowledgeable about pregnancy. Clients expressed the extreme stress that they felt while pregnant and experiencing homelessness and shared personal stories about how they face barriers to accessing adequate prenatal care, which research shows leads to increased risk of adverse birth outcomes. An article to a journal entry in Health Equity about the qualitative research done for CASSE has quotes from clients and is linked in my testimony. I encourage you to read that for the client perspective. HONEY is a partnership with DHS and is based at the Virginia Williams Family Resource Center. Clients must be deemed eligible for homeless services, be in any trimester of pregnancy, and be referred to Community of Hope by DHS or a provider in the homelessness continuum. HONEY began serving clients about a year ago, thanks to funding from the Federal Health Resources Services Administration and Optum Healthcare. HONEY connects parents-to-be with prenatal care, health education, including safe sleep training and parenting resources, and basic care supplies once a baby is born. Our care coordinators provide services from the prenatal period through the first 6 months of a child's life, facilitate transportation to appointments, and provide referrals for a variety of needs. There is also an educational component to HONEY, where a perinatal educator provides training to health and housing providers to bridge the knowledge gap on expectant parents who are experiencing homelessness. To date, 238 pregnant clients have been referred to HONEY. 117 of those clients have enrolled in our perinatal care coordination services, and another 30 have elected to receive lighter touch perinatal navigation services. 17% of those who participated were in the first trimester of pregnancy, 44% in their second trimester, and 39% in their third trimester. All of the pregnant clients who did not have a prenatal care provider at the time they enrolled in the program were connected to prenatal care, and that was a total of 13 in all. The change to HRSA's definition of family to include pregnant people in their second trimester is a much needed step toward improving maternal health outcomes for the district's pregnant residents. We believe it will have both quality of life and financial benefits for babies and families in the long run. We at Community of Hope look forward to continuing to collaborate to improve maternal and child health outcomes. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. McKenna Osborne, a policy attorney with the Children's Law Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson White and Councilmember Parker. My name is McKenna Osborne. I'm a policy attorney at Children's Law Center and a resident of the district. I'm testifying today on behalf of Children's Law Center. Our more than 100 staff work with children, families, and partners across the district toward a future where every child can grow up with a strong foundation of family, health, and education. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Housing is Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024. Children's Law Center supports this legislation because we know that access to safe and stable housing during and immediately after pregnancy improves birth outcomes and the health and well-being of DC mothers and infants. When a pregnant person experiences homelessness or does not have a safe, reliable place to stay, they're less likely to receive adequate prenatal care or have access to nutritious food, and are more likely to experience elevated stress, all of which increases their chances of developing adverse pregnancy-related health conditions and birth complications and disrupts the development of their baby. If the district wants to promote healthy pregnancies and healthy babies and address the disproportionately high rates of maternal mortality and poor birth outcomes among Black pregnant and postpartum people in DC, we should prioritize connecting pregnant people with the foundation of a stable home where they know they and their baby can stay as soon as possible in a pregnancy. However, our current homeless services law does not align with that priority. The district operates 2 homeless services systems, one for families and one for individuals. And under the current law, pregnant women without other children are not considered a family until their 3rd trimester. That means until their 3rd trimester, pregnant women experiencing homelessness are primarily offered beds in large, crowded single shelters and do not have access to the private rooms in short-term family housing that are calmer and more appropriate for pregnant people to rest and receive prenatal care. Additionally, it can take months from the time a family enters shelter to when they transition to a more permanent housing program like rapid rehousing or a voucher. So if a pregnant person does not enter the family shelter until their 3rd trimester, they could still be there and deeply stressed about an uncertain housing future during the critical final stages of their pregnancy. Therefore, Children's Law Center supports the change this legislation would make to the current definition of family in the district's Homeless Services Reform Act to include pregnant people in their 2nd trimester. Expanding this definition is an important step toward improving maternal and infant health outcomes and will bring the district closer to other jurisdictions like New York City and San Francisco that do not put any trimester restrictions on when a pregnant person can access specialized emergency shelter and housing services for families. We also welcome the opportunity to work with the committees on housing and health to ensure that the implementation of this bill does not detract from the availability and quality of services for other families in DC's homeless services system, and to identify opportunities to offer more targeted supports for pregnant people experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity. Thank you.
Ariel May, who I think is with us virtually. Ariel, I see you with us. If you hear me, if you would unmute and turn on your camera. All right, as we wait.
Hi,
Oh, there we are.
how are you? I was trying, it wasn't letting me. Good afternoon, council members. Hi,
Good afternoon, welcome.
my name is Ariel May. I am an Educare DC parent ambassador and a mother of 2 who has experienced tumultuous times around housing while I was pregnant. I am here today to share my story, hoping that it will help others understand the deep and lasting impact that unstable housing can have on families like mine. I've lived through this situation that no mother should have to endure, and my experience has taught me that there is no such thing as stable housing when safety and health are not guaranteed. For far too long, my children and I had to live in a place that should have been a sanctuary for home where we could feel secure and thrive, but instead was a place where fear, stress, uncertainty were constant companions. We lived in housing that was plagued with problems that no one should ever have to live with, let alone children. When I was pregnant with my son, I was forced to move out my single occupancy into a family unit where we witnessed domestic violence from neighbors. And so did my son once he was born. I feared for my child's safety every single day. The constant fear that something violent might happen in the middle of the night kept me awake, leaving me exhausted and emotionally drained. Within a year of giving birth, while on housing program provided by the city, my apartment was infested with rodents. I would find droppings in the kitchen, in the pantry, even in my son's room. I've tried everything I could do to make it livable, setting traps, filling up cracks, but it was a losing battle. The presence of pests made it impossible for me to relax or feel comfortable. It was difficult to cook meals or even allow my son to play in his own space without constantly worrying about his health or safety. No mother should have to worry about the well-being of her child in such basic ways. Even more so, no mother should have to worry about the health of their child prior to giving birth. To make matters worse, drugs were an issue in my building. There were constant frightening situations outside our door. I not only had to experience and endure while pregnant, but also after birth. The emotional toll of living in such unsafe environment was overwhelming. I had no choice but to stay. Moving seemed impossible. I had nowhere else to go. I was told there were units affordable, but it was all available in the city. I selected units that I believe were the best possible options at the time that were most affordable for me. It took a toll on my health, both mental and physical. It was just devastating. I barely slept some nights. I was emotionally drained and constantly on edge. The stress affected my ability to care for my children the way I wanted to. It started to show in my own well-being. I was sick and tired. I was constantly worried all the time. When I became pregnant with my daughter a little under a year ago, this legislation shines on the importance of pregnant mothers and the need that exists in the city for pregnant women to be shown priority early on. But it does not speak to the need for expected mothers to feel safe, healthy, and at peace. Housing is a foundation for everyone else in life. Everything else in life. Without safety and health, the intention behind this legislation is undermined. No mother should have to bring her newborn in a home to deplorable conditions that are unfit for human life. I urge members of council to consider the full picture when thinking about how this legislation will pass. I urge you consider language to be considered around the state and the conditions of housing units. When bringing a child into the world, you are aspiring to be the best parent you can be, and that only achievable if you have a peace of mind. I really appreciate you guys for listening to my story, and I hope this brings attention to the importance of ensuring that all families have equal opportunity, access to safe, healthy, and stable housing they deserve.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for being with us. Our final witness on this panel is Atelia Pittman, Parent Ambassador with Educare DC.
Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Okay. So, good morning. My name is Atelia Pittman. I am an Educare DC Parent Ambassador. I was an expectant mother up until yesterday. I gave birth to my beautiful baby girl.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm a Ward 7 resident. Ward 7 resident. I'm here to share my story with you today. I stand before you not only as an expectant mother, but also as someone who has been struggling with the uncertainty and fear of not having a safe and stable place to live. I want to begin by expressing my full support for the legislation being discussed today. I believe that it is a crucial step in addressing the housing crisis in our city. However, I'm here to urge you to reconsider and expand the scope of legislation to include stable housing. This term is included in the summary of the legislation, but it's not included in the legislation itself. For expectant mothers like me, or I had the baby yesterday, stable housing is not just about having a roof over our heads. It's about having a home where we feel safe, where we can rest, and where we can prepare to welcome our children into the world. Unfortunately, for many of us, including myself, I've had experiences with housing insecurity, are not limited to just the lack of a permanent address. The lack where we live must be safe, healthy, and secure. And right now, I do not have that. I've lived in apartments where bed bug infestations have forced me to move multiple times. The constant need to pack up my belongings and knowing if my things will be infested with pests or ruined has caused me extreme stress. Most recently, I've dealt with large holes in the ceiling that let in rain and cold air. I'm currently fighting for repairs to the floors of the apartment that I'm in now, that have created dangerous conditions for me and my child's safety. I'm constantly navigating around the air bubbles and things like that in the floor. The stress that comes with fear of mold, the rodents, other hazardous conditions that are going on just throughout this entire property. I know moms to be who are dealing with similar conditions, and I can tell you that the physical and emotional toll these situations take on us is devastating. A massive contributing factor to housing instability is unsafe living conditions causing unrelenting stress, and this stress affects our health, our well-being, and the health of our babies. Without safe housing, expectant mothers like me continue to experience insecurity even when we have a roof over our heads. To create housing for expectant mothers, stable housing must include not just an address, but also a component of safety. A stable home is a necessity for us. I'm asking that you guys amend this legislation to ensure that stable housing be included in the legislation because these components of safety and health are essential. We cannot continue to ignore the fact that the conditions of physical safety, cleanliness, security are directly tied to the housing that supports us physically and mentally, especially in this vulnerable time as we prepare to bring new life into the world. Thank you guys again.
Thank you so much for being with us. We'll do 7-minute rounds of questions. Azan Nadari, first of all, Mama Toto Village does such incredible and impactful work, and I appreciate everything that you all do. Actually, is Ms. Nadari still with us? Looks like you might have dropped off. They got work to do. Kelly Sweeney McShane. Look, I'm a dad, so I got a soft spot, and you could tell me something's going to be good for babies, and I'm going to say, let's do it. But I want to be disciplined and put on my legislator hat and ask about cost benefit, right? So there'll be some cost to the city to pass and implement this legislation. And there's a lot of, good testimony about why prenatal supports are important. And I think that all the testimony in that vein is accurate. But why specifically would this legislation and allowing expecting mothers to enter into our family system earlier, what specific impact would would that have? And is there anything from your Honey program that would give us information or data on how passing and implementing this bill would help mothers of babies specifically?
Thank you for that. So we are about 1 year into the program, and we will be pulling up data, and we hope to look at things like impact on accessing prenatal care visits, low birth weight, some of these really important metrics. We do not have that yet, but I hope to have it in the next 6 months or so. And that gets really sort of to that metric piece. I mean, I think what's clear from personal statements as we heard today and talking to clients and looking at all the data, it is just better for moms and babies to be stably housed the earlier in the pregnancy, the better. And so that is both in terms of human quality of life, but certainly in terms of long-term financial impacts of reducing costs related to NICU or other sort of future expenses farther out in the future. Well, I think the DHS current policy is really good. It just took us a long way to get to that policy, and having this embedded in law would really protect it. And as I noted, I think there might be some concerns. Are there additional costs? But we're really talking about a couple of months difference, right, between a second trimester and a third trimester. And I think that the value of housing somebody stably quicker and providing those important supports quicker far outweigh whatever those costs might be.
I appreciate that. As you get data, please share that with us. But your response actually teed up a really good question to McKenna Osborne. One thing I noted from your testimony, and my team noted, and I'm borrowing, is that you actually laid a good argument that we should look at first trimester, as opposed to second. And I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, given, as you said, the time it takes to work through the process.
I mean, I think that is certainly something worth exploring and something that advocates have recommended in the past. It just in terms of implementation and cost, and really making sure that there aren't unintended consequences for the family homelessness system is why for currently we are supporting the legislation as it is. But we would be open to having conversations about expanding to the first trimester, because we do know that a lot of these adverse impacts can occur if a person experiences homelessness or housing instability at any point in their pregnancy, including in the first trimester. So I think that's a goal that we should be moving towards. And Children's Law Center, and I'm sure a lot of the other people who are testifying here today would be happy to work with the council on. But I do think also that there's just in terms of making sure we have enough beds for everyone who needs it, we need to be really thoughtful about that. And also thinking about how we can connect, other supports, prenatal care, food options, for all pregnant people. And are there other ways we can be targeting those supports to pregnant people anywhere in our homelessness system?
To the point about detracting resources from other families, how do you think we should grapple with that aspect of it? There are unfortunately homeless families in the city, and it's within the realm of possibilities that the more expecting parents in family shelter system, the less room there will be for other families. How should we grapple with that?
I think having open conversations with DHS and any other providers in the continuum of care about the number of beds they have available now in short-term family housing will be really important, just to make sure that we are understanding what the impacts can be. As Kelly has said, DHS has been implementing some of this law already in policy for some pregnant people before their third trimester. So it should be small impacts, because it's really codifying a policy that has largely already been in place. But it's also just about making sure that we understand and thinking about if there are other solutions moving forward that would be more appropriate for pregnant people, like dedicated housing for pregnant people without children, and things like that.
I appreciate that. I'm sure Telia Pittman has very little sleep and a lot on your hands right now. So if I could ask you very quickly, if you are able, what was your experience accessing regular prenatal care during your first and second trimester versus your third? All right. So Telia Pittman is able to come back. We will ask, but again, this is an eventful time. As I pass it to my colleague, let me also just note the presence of members of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated sorority. It's fortuitous that this is one of the bills we're discussing while you're here, but also I think one of the clear indications of why local government is so important, and respected and mature organizations engaging with local government is important, because these issues are important to us, to our city, and to our families. So glad that you all are in the building today. Let me recognize my colleague, Zachary Parker, for questions.
Thank you. And Ms. Pittman, if you can hear us, I want to also congratulate you. I think that is pretty amazing that you give birth and you still are committed to testifying to ensure other moms can be afforded the opportunity of safe shelter when they are carrying a child. So hats off to you. I did have a question, but I'm not sure if you're there. And it was about this expansion of the bill to include safe and stable housing. And Ms. Osborne, I wanted to come to you because what I heard kind of as an undertone in your testimony was a questioning of our current system. When you laid out this, we have a system for families and everybody else, essentially. Is it fair to say that that undertone exists and there's room for us to explore how we might revamp our system, or am I reading too much into your comments?
I think that's something that we could follow up with and talk in terms of actually revamping the system. That's not something that I have an expertise or deep thought in, but it's more in terms of how are our systems set up to meet the very unique and particular needs of pregnant people. And that certainly our individual system is not currently set up for that. And so making sure that we're making adjustments like this legislation would to better meet those needs is what we need for pregnant people.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Ms. May, if you're still there, you detailed a number of challenges you experienced as you searched for a home, moved from one place to another. Can you just detail like the challenges that had or could have on an expecting mom? Okay, maybe Miss May is not there either. Okay, I'm gonna let me come to you, Miss McShane. Thank you for your testimony. Really interested, excited by the partnership with DHS with the Honey program. Can you delve more deeply into some of the numbers that you shared? I believe you noted 44% of the moms that you supported or helped were in their second trimester. And what are you seeing when a mom in their second trimester is in need of support? And the impact that you're able to have to just make it more real for folk who might be watching.
Yes, thank you very much. I think part of what we've been interested in tracking the trimesters is back to the policy guidance at DHS, which is showing being able to provide services to people earlier in their pregnancy, which is really important. What we are seeing is that there is a lot of interest and need, certainly for connection to prenatal care. Again, being struck that people later in their pregnancy might not have been connected. And I think that has a lot to do with struggling with some place to live. And as we heard, the stress of not having some place to live and how to prioritize. We are seeing a lot of requests for connection to emotional wellness And we know that perinatal mental health is really important. So connection to some mental health supports. And then connections to food continues to be a theme that we see in a lot of our programs. And then finally, just to resources, car seats, clothing, diapers. We partner with the DC Diaper Bank to make sure that people can get diapers. Diapers are very expensive. And so really meeting a lot of those basic needs. Transportation is very difficult. So making sure we connect with Uber Health so that people can get to prenatal appointments or any special appointments that they might be able to get. And what we found is working with DHS can really provide that shelter and housing support, but then we provide the knowledge around the prenatal period and what healthcare supports need to be met, and really combining those two together is very important.
I thank you for that. We know that the district, as was testified, has higher maternal mortality rates than any place in the country, and that's especially true for Black moms. How would your partnership expand should this policy go into effect? Because while we want to get more moms into housing, those things you're talking about, getting them connected to care, making sure they have resources and support, are going to still be needed and necessary. So how do you envision a program like Honey expanding to support this type of policy should it be implemented?
So I'm not sure there would be significant changes. I mean, if anything, we are in place to support anyone who has come in and deemed eligible for services, regardless of where they are in the pregnancy. I do think that there is sometimes confusion still because it was so long for so many years that you had to be in your third trimester, that changing the law and a strong communication that your second trimester is also sufficient will actually reduce some of those barriers and stress for people coming looking for help. Again, this is federally funded and privately funded dollars, and we do have funding to continue for several more years. I think the question will be that we're hoping this is going to prove really successful with lots of great outcomes. How do we sustain that beyond? How do we look at Medicaid paying for care coordination, and that we'll have set up good systems? How do we really keep those going? So that's more what I'm thinking of as we look much farther out ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I think Ms. Nadari has jumped off, but I want to just shout out the work that she and her team do day in and day out. And in fact, their work was an inspiration for this legislation. So thank you all for your testimony. And I look forward to working together as we try to get this across the finish line.
Let me thank this panel of public witnesses so much, and we will move to our second panel. Dr. Oye Owelewa, U.S. Representative for the DC Congressional Delegation. Aisha Barnes, JD, Program Manager for the Mary Elizabeth House Incorporated. I think we have a number of folks who are not with us, at least not yet. So let me keep calling to try to get us to 5. Mary Catherine West, Policy Analyst for DC Action. Vanessa Grant, President of the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. McKenna, there we are. Sibel Yadi Barrett with Muriel House, the Muriel House Coordinator and Healthy Babies Project. Rakita Steele with the Healthy Babies Project. Malaysia Rogers, Resident Monitor with the Healthy Babies Project. And Jaomi Owens, previous resident at the Healthy Babies Project. All right. And we will start with you, Aisha Barnes. Welcome. If you would hit that button on the base of the microphone. Excellent.
Perfect. My name is Asia Barnes, and I thank the council for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Asia Barnes JD, and I am the Program Director for the Mary Elizabeth House located in Ward 7. I'm also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, so I love to see the involvement. Here representing the Mary Elizabeth House, we are a small nonprofit that works to provide safe and stable housing to young mothers and their children who are experiencing homelessness. We are a 2-gen project because we specifically recognize the need to support mothers and their children at the same time. It's not enough to just provide resources for the child or just the mom. It has to happen in tandem. And so serving this population over the last year has revealed several things to me. One, teen mothers that exit the foster care system often graduate to the general population of homelessness. It's your 21st birthday, happy birthday. You're now at a benefits cliff. And most often you don't have a voucher or the necessary next steps to have certain and safe and stable housing for you and your child. 2, housing programs within the district are often prescriptive, and many single mothers and their children do not qualify for shelter. There's a lot of age restrictions. Your child can't be over a certain age. If you leave, you can't come back. There's only a certain set temporary time that women are able to engage with their supports. 3, accessibility is the #1 challenge for women with children, whether that be quality childcare, supports, or resources. It's great that we have programs, it's great that we have initiatives, but if the target population cannot access them, they are not effective. 4, expecting mothers often do not meet eligibility requirements for long-term housing options. 5, the continuum of care in the district is fragmented at best. So this is my assessment as a 10-year community advocate, a lawyer, and a scholar with a background in sociology. I left the legal field to pursue community full-time because I realized it was not enough to show up for people when it's time to punish them. Where are we when people are without housing, when they're traumatized, when they're victimized? We don't show up until it's time to be punitive. And I wanted to change that. And so the criminality and deviance that is seen and abhorred in the district is directly correlated to the socioeconomic strain felt throughout the wards for generations. One particular young woman comes to mind when I review the proposed Maternal Health Act. While 6 months pregnant, Janiyah reached out to me desperate for support and living in squalor. Janiyah explained that her home did not have power for majority of her pregnancy, that rats had taken over the home and eaten through her food, so she's not nourishing herself, she's not nourishing her child that's on the way. And the grief had overcome her so much that she often entered dark spaces in her mind and in her heart. At 6 months pregnant, Janiyah could not work, she could not secure a child care voucher, she could not finish a high school equivalency program. Moreover, Janiyah could not properly plan for her family because current district legislation refuses to recognize her as such. Unfortunately, Janiyah and her son only have each other. They are a family. When I reviewed the proposed amendment, a famous line from a Disney film echoed in my mind. Ohana means family. No one gets left behind. I urge every single person in the room to think of the time in your life when you have been the most vulnerable. When your back was against the wall, when the grief was clouding your vision so much that you couldn't even see a path forward through your tears. I want you to think about the moments when no one was coming to save you, and all you had to rely on was the little voice inside that believes in you. I'm here today to tell you that this is the lived experience of thousands of pregnant women in the district day in and day out. And with the current legislation, we are making a clear choice to leave women in their second trimester behind. The introduction of the Maternal Health Act of 2024 is critically important to the health, wellness, safety, and thriving of district women and their children. Mothers are the rooting system for the life that sustains this world. Youth development, achievement, and identity are intrinsically tied to the strength and stability of their rooting system. Empowering tomorrow's generation begins with the protection and provision of their mothers today. I thank you all so much for your time and pray my sentiments have resonated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Aisha Barnes. I think Mary Catherine West with DC Action. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Councilmember White, Councilmember Parker, and committee staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Housing is Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024. My name is Mary Catherine West, and I'm a policy analyst at DC Action and a Ward 1 resident. I'm grateful that this bill would remove a significant barrier for pregnant people to be able to access housing in their second trimester instead of waiting for the third. Births to parents under 25 make up about 15% of births in the district, and it is essential that these young parents have the support and resources they need to set up a solid foundation for themselves and their children. In 2023, the DC Primary Care Association, Children's National Hospital, Howard University, and DC Action released a well-being survey of expectant and parenting youth in the district. Of the 385 expectant or parenting youth under 25 years old who responded to the survey, 14% actively did not have a place to call home. 30% had experienced homelessness within a year of responding to the survey, and almost 50% reported housing as a top concern for themselves and their families. The impacts of homelessness and housing insecurity on pregnant people and their children have significantly detrimental health and economic consequences. When coupled with the structural racism that often limits Black people's access to opportunities, resources, and power in the district to create acute racial disparities in homelessness and housing insecurity, the result is wide and adverse perinatal outcomes for Black families. This legislation would help reduce a barrier to housing stability that contributes to adverse perinatal outcomes. My written testimony contains additional evidence pertaining to these severe health consequences for both parents and infants and young children. In addition to increasing the risk of birth complications and maternal morbidity, there is compounding stress for children who experience homelessness before and after birth. And the toxic stress associated with homelessness is an adverse childhood experience that has long-term consequences on a child's well-being. Accessing housing support as early as possible in pregnancy will help parents stabilize and exit homelessness, which is key to preventing negative health and well-being outcomes for both expectant parents and children. Earlier this year, Health Equity published Navigating Homelessness Assistance While Pregnant, a rapid qualitative research to policy collaboration in Washington, D.C., that recommends timely and meaningful access to safe and stable housing in pregnancy. After participants in the study discussed the harm and barrier created by the third trimester policy that is currently in place. A 24-year-old parent in the report said, "It was very depressing. When I was experiencing homelessness, I always kept a good job, so in the housing program's eyes, I don't need help. I couldn't get housed until I was 9 months pregnant. The housing office said, we can't give you anything unless you're 7 months at least." Other parents who participated in the study described the experience as stressful and frustrating. They want to take care of themselves and their babies, but delayed access to shelters created a barrier in their ability to access medical care, eat nutritious meals, or save money for the baby. While this legislation addresses and reduces this barrier, it does not eliminate it completely, and I urge the council to extend access to pregnant parents at any point in their pregnancy, including the first, second, and third trimester, to fully eliminate the time-bound barriers that parents might face. Parents want a place to unpack their own bags, to fold onesies, and prepare for their little ones. Trimesters measure the development of a child and should not measure the right to housing. We hope for a district where all parents, especially Black parents and young parents, have access to secure and stable housing that will set the foundation to thrive for themselves and their children. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Vanessa Grant, President of the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Greetings, Councilmember Robert White and distinguished members of the council. I am Vanessa Grant, President of the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I'm here today in support of the Housing and Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024. Our sorority is a private, not-for-profit organization whose purpose is to provide assistance and support through established programs in local communities throughout the world. The sorority prioritizes support for policy addressing many societal issues, including maternal mortality. One of our founders, Edna Brown Coleman, a native Washingtonian who now has a street named in her honor, died during childbirth in 1919. Her baby died 2 days later, and both are buried in DC at Woodlawn Cemetery. I'm here today to advocate for crucial change to the Homeless Service Reform Act that will redefine a woman in her second trimester of pregnancy as a family for the purpose of receiving emergency public housing services from the city. As a society, it is our moral duty to ensure that every person, particularly expectant mothers, has access to safe, stable, and affordable housing. Let us remember that housing is not just merely a roof over one's head. A home is the foundation of health, security, and well-being. A woman in her second trimester is already preparing to welcome a new life into this world. The stress and uncertainty of not having stable housing during such a critical period can have detrimental effects on both the mother's and the unborn child's health. National Institute of Health studies have shown that inadequate housing can lead to poor prenatal care, higher rates of preterm birth, and other adverse health outcomes. By recognizing a pregnant woman in her second trimester as a family unit for purposes of housing access, we can provide her with the necessary support to ensure a healthy pregnancy and a positive start for her child. Access to public housing will offer a stable environment where she can focus on her health and well-being, attend prenatal appointments without worry, and prepare for the arrival of her baby. The maternal mortality rate for Black women is disproportionately high nationwide, and especially for those living in DC. CDC data shows that Black women are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women, with most of these maternal deaths being preventable. An article from the DCist headlined that Black women account for 90% of pregnancy-related deaths. The District of Columbia's Maternal Mortality Review Committee addressed systemic factors impacting maternal mortality by evaluating services, care delivery, and referrals provided to birthing persons who died during pregnancy, childbirth, or within 365 days of the end of a pregnancy. The study by DC MMRC noted that descendants experience unemployment challenges, economic insecurity, unstable housing, and concerns for safe public transportation. This policy change is not just about providing housing. It is about investing in the future of our community. Every woman who has decided to bear a child should be able to do that in a safe and secure environment. And it is our responsibility to make that possible. Supporting expectant mothers through public housing assistance is a proactive measure that will have long-lasting benefits for our society as a whole. On behalf of the Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, I urge you to expand the definition of family unit to include pregnant women in their second trimester of pregnancy, with the understanding that by supporting pregnant women, we are supporting families, the future generation, and the future of our city. I applaud the council members that introduced this legislation. Together, we can create a community where every mother and child has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you so much for being with us. I think that's all of the registered witnesses who are on Zoom or in the room. So I'll go ahead and start questioning this panel. But if you signed up and have not yet testified, please contact my team at housing@dccouncil.gov, housing@dccouncil.gov. And I don't see anyone in the room who has not testified. So I will move into questions. I'll ask these questions of all the panelists, and I'll start at least the first one with Aisha Barnes. The public health connection between prenatal supports and long-term outcomes are important and accurate. But I want to move from a generalized truth to an assessment of how this specific proposal will help. What are your thoughts, and is there any data or any studies that we can look at, share with colleagues on the council, share with the agency to indicate that this proposal to allow access to our family housing programs in the second semester will help in any specific way?
Thank you. So I will leave the second part of the question about studies specifically in data to agency partners who have more experience with that. I can speak from the perspective of the lived experience of the parents that I serve and their children. And so one thing with the Bridge program in Ward 7, we provide wraparound supports. And so we give more than just housing. We give all of the other aspects of thriving that are needed, a lot of the life skills gaps, a lot of the things that weren't learned up until this point, but now we are bringing a new life into the world. And so one thing that I always tell the mothers in the residents in my program is that having a child is like the greatest group project you will ever participate in your life. And if you think about it from the perspective of being in school and like maybe this is like the final assignment, you work very hard, you plan, you strategize, you work with your group members. But what happens when the greatest group project of your life is no longer a group project, it's a solo project, and it's just you? You still have the responsibility, you still have the obligation to show up and to be prepared and to have that not say finished result, but to have to be prepared and to be ready for this new addition to your life, but you're doing it by yourself now. And so with that comes more preparation, being able within your third, fourth, fifth, sixth month, being able to properly plan and access resources, supports, and housing, and to even just be seen as worthy under the law. Like it's codified that you're not a family until 7, 8, or 9, but you still are waking up as a mother every day in your third month. You're still having to plan. You don't plan when the baby gets here. You don't plan on the 7th month mark exactly. This is something that takes time, it takes intention, and you have to sow seeds into this process. Motherhood is a journey, it's an experience, and it's one that should be respected and protected. And it's also one that mothers in the district deserve to enjoy. The quality of life that you experience, so many mothers that I serve don't have baby showers that they can look forward to. They don't have moments that they can sit and go back to their baby book and say, oh, this is 3 months and this is 4 and this is 5. They are in extreme grief, extreme anxiety. They are unwell and they are struggling, and they are not even able to do the essential daily steps of living, of bathing, of eating, of feeding yourself and your child, but you are expected to have a birth plan, know where you're going to have this child, know where the child is going to stay. You're going to be in postpartum for a significant amount of time after that. Many employers don't want to hire women with children, and especially new mothers, because you're not as readily available as the rest of the workforce in their eyes. And so women in these positions are they are unprotected, and I believe that this change in this proposal will give women in their second trimester a lot more backing and a lot more confidence in the fact that they are seen, they are valued, they are deserving of support, and they have what it takes and the resources within the district to be able to do this and do this well.
I appreciate that. I'm going to ask the same question to Mary Catherine West, but let me give a little bit more perspective. The agency is not in support of this bill, and I don't say that as a criticism to the agency. They're going to raise some arguments, and we have to sort through the arguments. And so, without being able to pull on data and specific outcomes, it's going to be difficult to overcome the agency's opposition, and the bill won't pass. So I ask this not because I don't think this is important. I ask it because it is important, and I want to work to create a pathway or in some opportunities even to move the agency. But I needed information in order to do that. So Mary Catherine West, same question to you. Beyond the public health connection between prenatal supports and long-term outcomes, is there any data, any studies, or anything specific that we can say, yes, passing this bill will have a clear outcome?
Sure. The first thing that's top of mind is in the well-being survey that we conducted with young parents under 25, there was a self-reported measure of thriving. And part of that analysis was to understand what were the impacts on this? And the researchers found that each additional move that a parent had to make, either when they were expecting or with a child, reduced their likelihood of reporting that they were thriving by 23%. So each time that a parent moved had a significant impact on down the road, do they think that they're going to be thriving, or are they thriving right now? And so with this bill, in accessing family supports instead of having to go to the individual shelter and then go to family support, would reduce the number of moves that young people and expectant parents have to make. I will follow up and look for further resources in terms of the prevention aspects and cost benefits for the agency to really prove this case.
I appreciate it. And the feedback has been very helpful so far. Among other important and persuasive things you said, Aisha Barnes, mothers are mothers in the second trimester, and you got to make decisions in that vein. And so I'm glad I asked a question, because that's something that really resonated with me. And Mary Catherine West, I'm recalling, which I didn't expect to recall, a study on academic outcomes based on how often kids had to move. And moving during the school year actually had a tremendous impact on I wouldn't have assumed that had they not studied that. And so when you started talking about expecting parents having to move and the impact it may have, that resonated very much with me. So let me ask the same question to Vanessa Grant, if you have anything to add there. Anything that you come to mind with specificity of how this specific bill, beyond the general public health conversation, can have impactful outcomes on expecting parents and children in the long term?
I think to just add to what both panelists have said, I think it's very important that we look at the mental state of mothers when they are pregnant. If they're pregnant in a normal situation, there's still some mental impact that's imposed upon them. But then once you add the fact that they don't have stable housing, or they're in a housing that have rat infested, where they're looking for their welfare, or the welfare, like one of the panelists said earlier, the welfare of their born child already. That's a very heavy impact that they have on their mental state. So I think, as much as you said, it's not a bill that is not very well received at this point, we really do have to look at the mental capacity and the mental state of the mothers at this time, and then of the unborn children that she's carrying while she's going through this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. Just two things I would say. One, we're having this conversation at a time when our country is debating, rightly or wrongly, about women's right to govern their own health care and having access to abortion rights. I also really appreciated the reference to Edna Brown Coleman and the legacy she leaves behind, because it's just a reminder that how many remarkable women have suffered during or after childbirth and sadly are no longer with us. I wanted to come to our panelists, and I'll just offer this to both of you generally. One of the concerns that DHS is raising, as I understand, is that by making this adjustment, we're going to limit capacity to serve larger families. One, I would love for you to respond to that assertion. And also, I want to come to this data point that you referenced in your testimony. And I can't find it. So while I look for that, what would be your response in terms of the impact of this bill limiting capacity for larger families through our emergency shelter program for families?
I think that, as we heard from Kelly Sweeney McShane earlier, parents in the first trimester and second trimester are already being served. And thinking through the consequences for that for large families, we want to make sure that all families can have the support that they need, and that with the codifying of this legislation, of the parents that are getting that support won't be, removed from it later down the road. But I'll have to follow up. I'm not deeply ingrained in terms of the capacity supports for DHS as well.
Understood.
Just to add to what she said, I also feel as though the need is still there, regardless of whether, whether we decide to shine the light on this specific population or this specific population. It's all a population of people who need housing and people who are in need. And I can only advocate for the population that I serve, and in saying that so many of these women are on their own. They are by themselves. It is them and the child that is in their womb. They are not a mother at 7 months. They're a mother when that first kick comes in, that first ultrasound, that first moment of realization that there is a human being in my body, and I am responsible for teaching, for growing, for nourishing this life that is within me. I would say that single mothers, expecting mothers are often a forgotten population. I particularly serve a population that comes from foster care, and that is also an unheard population as well. What happens when you're a child in foster care and you have a child? Your foster family or your placement didn't necessarily sign on for that. You're sent into the general population of homelessness. And then, as other panelists have said, these shelters and temporary places of housing that are offered for relief are not equipped to support pregnant mothers, new mothers, mothers with infants. It's unsafe, it's unstable for them. And so we have a population, while it is a minority, its minority voices still matter. And I would say with single mothers and expecting mothers, they are at even more of a disadvantage being by themselves, having so many complications, having the onset of postpartum on top of the anxiety and depression that comes with being houseless. I would just further advocate that this is a population that absolutely needs a voice, needs support, needs to be seen and heard. Injustice and inequity is not just a feeling, it's codified. The inequity of a 6-7 month pregnant woman not being seen as a family is a problem that needs to be addressed.
No, I really appreciate that. And this emphasis on the need still being there. It's not either or. It's how do we provide support to all of these families and women in need. And so I really appreciate that point. President Grant, I wanted to come to you and offer a similar question. What would be your push for why this is essential and we should look beyond just the fear-mongering of what could potentially happen, but how this might help women in their second trimester?
I would say, how can one look at sacrificing a mother with a child growing in their body because she doesn't have a born child, and say that a family that's already has 1 or 2 children is more important than that mother that's having a baby? So we need to look at the housing issue and not necessarily choose because someone has an unborn child that's growing, where other families, have more than 1 children and already have housing. So it's
And to
one
your
is a bigger
point,
more than the other.
and to your point, to go even further, we're not even saying a mom with 1 or 2 kids. We're saying an expecting mom only 2 or 3 months later could be eligible, but it will upend our system if by any chance we give access 2 to 3 months sooner. And we know by research the impact that shelter, the health and wellness of the mom has on the survival rate of that child. And so, I don't buy the criticism, and we'll have DHS before us in a minute, but I wanted to offer you that opportunity. I also want to just recognize the great work that you and your chapter continue to do, as well as the women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated that are in the chamber today, because this is what it's all about. So from a fellow Greek, I just would say thank you all for being here and leaning in with us. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to this panel. We are, I believe, We've heard from all of our public witnesses. So we will move to our government witness, and I would like to welcome Rachel Pierre, Administrator of the Family Services Administration at the Department of Human Services. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. As you know, it is the practice of this committee to place our government witnesses under oath. I ask that you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. If you would hit the button on the base of your microphone and you can begin your testimony.
Chairperson White, Councilmember Parker, members and staff of the Committee on Housing, and members of the community, good afternoon. I am Rachel Pierre, Administrator for the Family Services Administration and the Department of Human Services. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of DHS Director Laura Zeilinger and the executive at this public hearing on Housing is Maternal Health Amendment Act of 2024, also known as Bill 250945. We acknowledge and agree that access to stable housing and high-quality healthcare are extremely important components of healthy pregnancies. Expectant mothers who have a safe space to call home and consistent prenatal services are more likely to experience positive health outcomes for themselves and their child. We also know that homelessness and housing insecurity significantly increases the risk of poor health outcomes, including higher rates of preterm birth, low birth weight, maternal depression, and infant mortality. DHS has a crucial role in supporting the maternal and child health of residents who seek homeless services. We provide immediate access to homeless services and prenatal care programs while accommodating the specific needs of each pregnant woman. DHS ensures that pregnant women who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness, regardless of stage of pregnancy, are connected to local programs that provide emergency housing, perinatal care services, food, and cash benefits. However, this bill, which amends the definition of family in the Homelessness Services Reform Act to include pregnant women in their second trimester, does not improve access to housing or solve housing challenges people face at time of pregnancy. Much of the testimony we heard today was about housing conditions. DHS agrees that poor housing conditions must be addressed and urged the Housing Committee to pay close attention to what can be done about ensuring healthy and habitable housing. This bill is about access to shelter and does nothing to hold landlords accountable for offering adequate housing. The bill conflates services offered to families through the continuum of care with permanent housing and does little to promote housing as maternal health. Instead, it unnecessarily ties the hand of the agency in allocating resources to meet the needs of families presenting for homeless services. For these reasons, DHS does not support Bill 250945. In 2022, DHS worked with our partners at Community of Hope to revise our policies and procedures for serving pregnant women who present at Virginia Williams Family Resource Center. As a result of the collaboration, we instituted the following policies to improve health and housing access for pregnant people seeking homeless services. By providing supportive services and resources regardless of stage of pregnancy. By connecting pregnant individuals to community-based organizations to address their needs for stable housing. And by providing 24/7 access to emergency shelter and homeless prevention program services or family shelter when needed. Regardless of stage of pregnancy, emergency housing and homeless prevention services are available to pregnant women who present at Virginia Williams Family Resource Center. Pregnant women in their first and second trimester without minor children have 24/7 access to emergency shelter through our singles program and are not required to exit during the day. As we add non-congregate bridge housing to singles continuum, this emergency shelter is also potential an option for pregnant women needing a reasonable accommodation. Pregnant women with minor children also have 24/7 access to emergency shelter through our short-term family housing programs. We also have shelter intervention services available to pregnant women through the Homeless Prevention Program known as HPP. We present pregnant women to HPP to prevent a shelter stay when possible. HPP provides case management and wraparound services, including prenatal, perinatal care, rental, utility, transportation, food assistance, as well as housing search and support. Referrals to HPP can be made by low barrier shelter case managers to Virginia Williams. As referrals are received, an eligibility worker completes an assessment for homeless services. Once an eligibility assessment is completed, the household is connected to case management services through one of our HPP partners. DHS also engages these residents through the HONEY program that you're familiar with now through Community of Hope, Housing Our Neighbors, Empowering You to provide perinatal and care support. In partnership with nonprofit partners, Community of Hope perinatal care coordinators ensure that pregnant women experiencing homelessness are connected to prenatal care and provide deeper support to up to 6 months after a child is born. Our partner, Community of Hope, also conducts regular educational trainings for local service providers on the needs of expectant mothers and the housing and health supports available. Given these considerations, we understand that the intent of this bill is to seek to provide maternal health outcomes, which is also a priority for DHS. However, this bill redirects resources that could otherwise support larger families experiencing homelessness. This limits the agency's ability to exercise discretion and allocate resources effectively based on broader needs and priorities. An amendment requiring pregnant women in their second trimester without minor children access to short-term family housing deeply concerns us, as such a shift would create occupancy in emergency shelter that could potentially be used for families from anywhere from 4 to 10. This Reform Act, families must be housed in non-congregate settings, and a reduction in capacity could result in families being diverted to overflow shelters or motels, undermining our ability to meet the demand for shelter. In closing, we understand that there's a heightened health concerns for a woman experiencing homelessness at the time of pregnancy or birth of a child. To help families achieve safety and access to healthcare, we ensure that any district resident who is pregnant and in need of shelter is able to access a safe place inside with connection to services. Pregnant individuals experiencing homelessness who also have access to a homeless prevention program resources. We also work with our nonprofit partners in the community to connect expectant mothers to prenatal and perinatal care that foster positive infant and maternal health outcomes. We believe strongly that the intent of this bill can be met without changing the law, which may have unintended consequences of overstretching the quality of services provided to families with minor children. Thank you for the opportunity to share my testimony. I'm available to answer questions from the committee.
Thank you so much. Ms. Pierre, how many pregnant people in their third trimester enter family shelters per month?
Per month, I can give you the information since 2023. Third trimester, 46. We had 46 pregnant person entering family shelter in the third trimester.
I'm sorry, was that an annual number or a monthly number?
That was an annual number since 2023.
Okay. On average since 2023. Okay. And what prenatal services are currently provided to pregnant people in shelters?
So I just want to make sure that it's clear that prenatal services are offered to pregnant women at any stage of pregnancy. So they are referred automatically to the honey program as soon as we found out that they are pregnant. But also the best tool for us to divert a pregnant woman is to the homeless prevention program. We believe that shelter is not a good place for a family, a woman to give birth. So we make sure that we have an opportunity to divert from shelter.
Okay. Is there, so no prenatal services are available to pregnant people in shelter, or do you divert them to other programs?
So the services are not provided in the shelter,
Okay,
even in short-term family housing. It's
Okay.
always a referral to other programs.
okay. And what specific data supports the claim that this bill would overstretch resources to create overflow in shelters?
So we know from a capacity perspective, for example, currently, I think we currently only have 40 beds available, 40 units, I must say, available in our short-term family housing. And if we were to, but that could serve, anywhere between 4 and 10 individuals. So those 40 units could serve up to 400 people. And if we put a single person, then that would automatically limit our capacity.
There are 40
Available units
across the city.
in short-term family housing right now.
Okay. And I'm assuming from your testimony that those are generally at capacity?
So that's our capacity. That's not the census. Those are the units that are available currently. Our capacity is about 354 units across the city. We have our census, about 263 of those units are occupied. We have 43 available, and we have about 40 units offline.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got lost.
Sure.
How many units available for families across the city?
354.
Okay,
That's the
And-
capacity.
that's capacity. It's in the, okay. And what is the average, how many of those units are used on average?
As of today, it's 263.
Okay. And you said some are offline?
But yes. So for sometimes repairs, it takes 1 or 2 days to turn over a unit after a family has moved.
Mhm.
So we track the capacity daily.
Okay, but that's still about 90 units, which is a pretty substantial percentage. But your thrust of your argument is that this bill would overstretch resources in the family shelters, but it doesn't seem like the data supports that.
I believe that the data supports it.
Say more, please.
Sure. So right now, as a policy, we provide shelter year-round to families experiencing homelessness. These are new to our system due to the system reform, that we have a system that allows us to be able to move families through and to provide shelter year-round. Changing that law would ultimately tie our hands to really provide the minimum, potentially, which is services, shelter to families in a non-congregate setting and shorter family housing. We know that we have more families in their first and second trimester who comes and seek shelter that we've been able to divert from the homeless services system altogether and not have had to move them into shelter.
So I would say at this point, and please do feel free to follow up.
Sure.
I don't understand the data to support the notion that we don't have that this would push out larger families. I'm not seeing that, but feel free to follow up. But why would the agency not suggest that maybe when family shelters are below a certain vacancy rate, that you would allow expecting mothers in their second term?
So when an expecting mother in the second trimester requires a reasonable accommodation, we definitely allow a family to be placed in a short-term family housing, if the woman to be placed in short-term family housing. So we want however, this bill would tie our hands and force us to do this versus have the discretion to really kind of prioritize based on the family needs.
Okay, so you You have the discretion now and you use it where you can.
We do.
Okay. What you mentioned, the honey program, what measurable outcomes have been achieved through programs like honey in supporting pregnant women?
So I think that the evidence is there that women who receive prenatal services at any stage, as soon as they find out that they are pregnant through postpartum, perinatal and postpartum, is the most important factor in ensuring for a healthy pregnancy. We don't have yet, as Kelly mentioned, the data in terms of the outcomes of the honey, since we are very early in implementation, but we do know from evidence that ultimately that's the best predictor of healthy babies is making sure that they are receiving those services at any stage of the pregnancy. And those services are available to any resident who comes into our shelter seeking services at any stage of pregnancy. So that is the most important intervention for us, as well as a homeless prevention program to divert them from the shelter altogether.
What's the average number of women in their second trimester of pregnancy in shelters? Do you have that?
So right now, we only have 2 women in our low barrier shelter in the around the second trimester. So I think we have 1 in the second trimester. We have 1 who's entering her 3rd trimester who's getting transitioned.
Okay. Thank you very much. We hand it to Councilmember Parker.
Thank you for your testimony. And I may ask some of those numbers again, just
Sure.
For the record. On average, how long does a family stay in housing via the family services that are provided, or a unit that you're referencing?
So I think the question that you're asking is what's the length of stay for a family that stays in short-term family housing, which is the shelter?
Yes.
It's about 90 days. We aim for 90 days. I think we're about 86 days right now.
And what is the off-boarding process for you all? So a family is at 80 days or 70 days, they're coming up on 90 days, and then what happens?
So most of the families who exit short-term family housing exit through FRSP, which is rapid rehousing for families.
Got it. Which is, do you have numbers on that? Like a percentage of how many families are entered through rapid rehousing versus just exit the program altogether?
I don't have that exact number, but I can tell you it's pretty high. It's over 90%.
So more than 90% of families in the emergency housing program stay for about 90 days, and then they're pushed into rapid rehousing.
They're exited through rapid rehousing.
Or
Yes.
exited through rapid rehousing. One of the assertions made in your testimony is that the bill conflates services offered to families through the continuum of care with permanent housing and does little to promote housing as maternal health. Based on the fact that we would be providing moms in their second trimester access to housing for roughly 90 days, and then transitioning them to rapid rehousing, does that not afford them housing?
So short-term family housing is just a family shelter. It's still shelter. It's not housing. So what we're able to do when a family comes in their second trimester, we actually try to divert them from shelter.
No, I get that, and I'm going to get to that part. But
Sure.
so the difference, as I understand it, is that there is more privacy, and even the use of the term unit, to me, makes it seem like they're rooms. Like I think of like a hotel. So you have your room, I have my room, although we're all in this one shelter. So I don't want to get lost in the terminology. What I'm coming at is to attack the assertion that this bill does not afford expecting moms housing, because based on my understanding and your explanation, moms would have housing for 90 days and then transition to rapid rehousing.
So moms will have shelter. So shelter is available to women at any stage of pregnancy. We ensure in policy that any pregnant woman.
Is it non-congregate shelter?
It is not non-congregate shelter.
And so the difference again is for safety, for a host of reasons. What we've heard today is the reason why an expecting mom that may be 5 months may want to have privacy of a unit versus there are 30 people here in this shelter, or there's someone existing next to me, is for them to feel safe, be safe, et cetera. So respectfully, I feel like in the rebuttal here, we're kind of conflating things. The assertion is we're conflating things, but shelter and the family services are not one and the same. Would you agree with that?
So the only difference is where we provide services. So yes, it is in a non-congregate setting that we provide services for singles. So our woman in a second trimester has access to shelter, just like a woman in her third trimester has access to shelter. We don't believe that either low barrier shelter or family shelter is a good place for a mom to give birth. So housing is.
That's why you're diverting
That's
most
why
of.
we are diverting to housing. And there is an opportunity for a woman in her second trimester who gets diverted to avoid a shelter stay altogether, and that is the best outcome.
Well, I don't disagree there, but what would stop you from still attempting to divert that mom out of the homeless services system while still giving her access to family shelter?
So nothing, we do both.
And you could theoretically do both.
So we provide services to pregnant individuals regardless of stage of the pregnancy.
Yes.
When there's a need for reasonable accommodations, we ensure that we have the opportunity to provide shelter in a non-congregate setting.
But to be clear, providing a mom in her second trimester does not preclude you all to still attempt to divert her from homeless services altogether. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. So one assertion is this bill conflates our continuum of care with housing. And I just reject that because all of what we're doing is providing people housing. It may not be permanent housing where we ultimately want to get them towards, but it does provide them housing. The other assertion made was that, well, this will upend our capacity. Councilmember White asked, what is our current capacity? And there's roughly 40 units available out of a total of 354 units, about. There is about 263 units that are being used. And I believe you said there were 46 moms that entered family housing in their third trimester. Does that track with the numbers?
Yes, 46 moms have entered, 46 moms without, I'm sorry, actually. No, I want to change that number. And fiscally, and to go back to also your question, Councilmember White, I just want to correct that in fiscal year 24, which was your question, that we had about 124 pregnant individuals presenting in their second trimester at Virginia Williams with one or more children, but we had 90 pregnant individuals presenting in their second trimester with no children. So I just wanted to kind of correct that first number. So I think it answers your question also, Councilmember.
And is
Parker.
that 46 number still accurate? That there
So the 46 numbers was a total referrals to Honey. It was not a total.
I see.
Yes.
So 124 women in their second trimester who had children.
Yeah.
Outside of just being pregnant.
That's correct.
And then there were 90 women.
Yes.
Who in their second trimester that sought services.
Yes. And since I'm correcting the record also, Councilmember White, this does speak to our concerns with the capacity because we would have more women who sought shelter, pregnant women in the second trimester, that we would even have capacity for today if all of them were to move to our short-term family housing.
I appreciate. I'm going to let Councilmember Parker continue, but
Sure.
You're saying now you're referencing people who come to Virginia Williams. My question was people in shelter.
Oftentimes, we're able to divert them. We only have 2 women in shelter, in low barrier shelter, because we've been able to divert them from shelter altogether.
Okay.
And I'm just going to finish this train of thought. I'm not sure if we're doing more rounds or I should just keep going. Okay. If I could just finish this train of thought. So 90 women sought care in their second trimester. Do you have data on how many of those women you diverted? Which it sounds like all but 2. Is that fair?
Sure. So we refer all of the women. I'm not sure if we have the data, and we can get probably that data for you. So how many actually said yes to the HPP.
And you're saying roughly 46 moms in their third trimester actually entered family services.
So no, so the 46, so I'm just recorrecting myself. The 46 number was actually the
honey
number
program.
of women who came to, who presented in their third trimester who were connected to honey.
I got it. Do you have the number of women in their third trimester that sought housing services? Since you're saying the 46 number is not accurate.
No, but I think because we don't track it if they don't have, so no, but I can see if we can get that number
If
for
you
you.
could,
Sure.
because that's the crux of the argument. And I just want to be respectful of the clock and I'll come back. But even if 90 women in their second trimester sought care, which is a significant number, and it speaks to our need to do more in housing, I'm not persuaded that all 90 women would be enrolled in the family services program because you're admitting you're going to work to divert the majority of them. So let's say half of them or a third of them actually are enrolled. Having that number would kind of give us an ability to ratio what we're seeing in the women in their third trimester and what that might mean for women in their second trimester, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to undermine your capacity argument.
So I'm not sure I'm following.
So you're saying 90 women sought care. I'm not persuaded that all 90 women would enroll in the family services program. In other words, you're going to try to get some of them into other programs. Some of them might naturally just drift away. And I think a much smaller number would actually enroll in our housing programs and therefore would not overwhelm our capacity.
So
And then I'm gonna
so you mean
relinquish the
our
mic.
shelter program? So you mean, okay, no, that. So I think again, we are conflating housing and shelter, that we provide shelter to anyone who does not have an opportunity to be diverted from shelter, to any pregnant person at any stage of pregnancy. The maternal health and outcomes for pregnant people is a priority for DHS as well. So we know that the best intervention is connection to prenatal, perinatal care, which we do through our partnership with Community of Hope. That's why the Honey program is co-located in Virginia Williams in diversion so that we do get pregnant women to stable housing prior to giving birth.
Yeah, I am interested in the notion of discretion. I'm happy to know that the agency has and uses its discretion for pregnant women. What's the process for pregnant women to access family housing if they don't have minor children already?
So currently, it's if they present with in their third trimester and they cannot be diverted because diversion, the HPP is something that we offer to all women, then we do bring them in if they meet the eligibility determination, being a district residents and being in the third trimester and so forth.
So there's no, is there additional formal documentation that they need to show?
Yes, so there's an eligibility determination to make sure that we confirm the pregnancy, to make sure that they are district residents and so forth.
And what about second trimester? Yeah, because that's the place where you said you have discretion now. What would be the process for someone in their second trimester to access family housing?
If they are deemed to require reasonable accommodations.
Well, what's the process for?
That doctors, note stating that they they cannot be served and they are, high risk and they require reasonable accommodation. But we also want to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that in any other non-congregate setting that we have, because as we are bringing more non-congregate setting with the Aston, we have the new opening of the Aston. We are planning on bringing another non-congregate shelter, East Street, in the next fiscal year, or this fiscal year rather. And we also, with the opening of the new Pat Handy, we have 5 rooms, that's single occupancy room. So we are building, improving in our single system to be able to offer more options for non-congregate setting. So then pregnant women who in their first or second trimester who may require some reasonable accommodations could also be better served in those facilities.
Okay, so they can't just be in their second trimester of pregnancy. They have to be, I guess, particularly vulnerable health-wise.
Currently, yes.
Okay. What, if any, changes in operations or the intake process would need to happen to implement this change if this bill went into effect?
So, so the big difference, Councilmember, is that it would force us to serve them in short-term family housing versus giving us a discretion to serve them in another setting, for example, either in a single-room occupancy at Pat Handy or in a non-congregate, setting. So we, in the family system, we provide more than what is mandated by law, and we do fear that with this bill, it could force us to limit the quality of the services that we're offering to only be able to provide what is mandated.
I'm sensitive to the arguments that you're raising, but I'm also thinking through the testimony and the idea of stress and the impact that has both on the expectant mother, but also on the baby. Being in shelter is stressful, and the congregate shelters, I don't think most of them you can stay during the day. That's tough for someone in their second trimester. So, if we have availability and someone is in their second trimester, but may not be able to meet the reasonable accommodation, why would we not prioritize them for family housing?
In some cases, we do. In some cases, we do. If this becomes law, we will not have the opportunity to prioritize. It could potentially undo a lot of the improvements that we've done, potentially move families to back to being in motels, or potentially keep us from actually providing shelter year-round, which has been a big improvement in the past 10 years in family shelter. In policy, we provide shelter to any family who requested in our short-term family housing year-round, and when we're only mandated to do so during a hypothermic condition.
But what if the bill was amended to give you the ability to prioritize and take factors into account?
So we don't believe that we need a bill to do that, because we have the same priorities to make sure that we provide services, and we feel very strongly that we don't need a bill to do that. However, we'd be happy to work with the council to potentially amend a bill that would meet both what the council intends in this bill and not tie our hands to not having the discretion.
Okay, because it seems like you have the discretion, but it seems like you are relying particularly on reasonable accommodations. And so the thrust of this bill and how the agency is using its discretion are not the same. And you're right, this could be done without legislation. And so since the council period is about to end, hopefully the agency can engage with the committee and Councilmember Parker to see if there are some changes we can make either in practice or in the legislation. But it does seem like there's some room here to figure this out collectively. Those are all the questions I have. So let me turn to Councilmember Parker for a final round.
And we would welcome the opportunity to work with your office, council member.
Yep, I welcome that. It's my understanding right now, law states that only women in their third trimester can be afforded these family services. Is that accurate?
So, so family services, so I think you mean again shelter. So really currently, yes, we only serve families and family shelter.
Yes. And family is defined as a mom or person with children or in their third trimester. So to Councilmember White's point, and I'll take you at your word, I'm willing to work together, but legally, you couldn't afford a woman in her second trimester access to family shelter.
No, we can't do that. We don't need the law for us to do that currently. So we do, so, you know, I mean, like our mandates are minimum standards, right? So we don't want to be, so we have policies that are way, you know, above what we're mandated to
I
do.
see.
This new policy that we implemented in 2021, we didn't wait for it to become law for us to do this. We recognized that there was a gap in our system. We recognized that we needed to better serve women at any stage of pregnancy to, so that we implemented the law to make sure that even if they went into low barrier shelter, they didn't have to leave during the day, for example, which was a change, which is a COVID era change in a low barrier shelter. They used to close during the day, they no longer close during the day, pregnant women.
So what I'm hearing you say is, well, we can work to massage our policies so that a woman in her second trimester can take advantage of these family shelters.
Right, as long as we work together to make sure that it doesn't tie our hands so that it doesn't limit our policy.
Sure. I mean, I will say transparently, I don't have the same read of it because it's my understanding that the law was amended with the legal definition of what a family is defined as in the District of Columbia, which is a woman in her third trimester or someone with children. And so if
That is correct, but it does not preclude us to be able to place a woman
I see.
in, if needed, in our short-term family housing.
I got you. Okay, well, I welcome the opportunity to work together. I think that is why the numbers would be really important, because if we have 40 or so units available, how many moms in their second trimester currently are desperate for housing that we could be providing relief for? That's something that's a rhetorical question. I'm not asking you to answer that right now.
Thank you.
On the timing piece, a woman in her second trimester, if you're saying on average they're only staying 90 days, to me that means there would be a constant churning of women in the program. And so getting back to the capacity constraints, I don't necessarily buy that, because if you enter in your 5 months, by the time you're 8 months or 9 months, you would be transitioning into rapid rehousing. And so I don't see this threat of overwhelming our system. And here's a question. Do you have numbers of where our family shelter availability was last year? I know you gave it for fiscal year 24 or currently.
I'm happy to get that for you. I don't have it offhand.
And also, has it ever been overwhelmed in the sense we had no units available to provide to families?
So the reforms that we've made in family shelter in the past, 10 years, have allowed us to really have like a dynamic system that we ensure that we have the capacity and we exit families through rapid rehousing. But we want to make sure that we also, exit through, something that's sustainable for families. And we want to make sure that we keep the capacity, some capacity available, so that we don't, if there's that we don't return back to the motels.
So just following up there, are you aware of any time we've overwhelmed our family shelter program where there were no available units?
Not since the implementation of, not since we've closed DC General, but DC General was an overflow, shelter, and we were also in motels, and we want to make sure that we never go back to motels. So that's why we want to make sure that we have discretion in using our capacity and prioritizing to the needs of district
I
residents.
see. And so I'll just end here by saying, again, I'm willing to work with you. I take the agency in good faith that you're wanting to solve this problem. I know folk at DHS are working really hard. I also know we have a problem. And so to suggest that the status quo is working, I think we would be kidding ourselves to accept that, both on the maternal outcome side of things, but also on our housing side of things. And we need to think boldly. We need to push the boundaries of what is currently existing. We heard testimony today from a range of folk, including moms, one who just gave birth yesterday, and even some of your own partners that are saying, yes, we need this policy. So I truly hope DHS will go back to the drawing board to say, how can we get to a yes versus no? But again, I want to thank you for coming to testify today.
Thank you very much, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Thank you very much, Ms. Pierre, for being with us. That concludes our questions and testimonies. I do want to note that anyone who was not able to testify today, you can submit written testimony and it will be made part of the official record. Anyone who's interested can submit testimony by email to the committee on housing@dccouncil.gov. The record for this hearing will remain open until the close of business on Monday, December 16th, 2024. Finally, if anyone listening is interested in learning more about the work of this committee and my office, please sign up to hear from us at robertwhiteatlarge.com. The business before this committee is concluded. The time is 2:03 p.m. and this roundtable is adjourned.